In the last video, we took this old 383 and we started to tear it down to see if we were going to be able to salvage this engine. Upon further inspection, I did find some deep pitting in cylinder number 7, which happened to be one of the only cylinders that had any kind of significant damage. And today we're going to go ahead and continue that and tear down the rest of the engine. I've already pulled out all 8 pistons and all 8 rods, so now it's time to check all these clearances. Overall, the crank actually looked really nice. I don't see any kind of deep scratches. I don't see any kind of pitting, and for the most part, it does look like it's in really good shape, nice and shiny. I don't know if it's ever been cut or polished, but we're going to go ahead and find that out right now. Most of the rod bearings look like they were in decent shape. The worst one was probably this one out of cylinder number 4. It just has a little bit of wear. It looks like it might have impacted the crank. The bottom doesn't seem to have any kind of real serious wear. The bearings do have a couple marks here and there, but that's marks from me measuring them out right now. But this mark could have been from anything. It could have been from a little bit of oil starvation, worn oil pump, or even revving it out for too long with too thin of an oil. It could have been anything, and since this was pretty much the only one that kind of looked like this, I'm not too concerned. One funny thing about this rod though is that, as you can see, most of the material is still pretty much there. In the last episode, we looked at the back of the rods, and they looked like somebody was trying to either balance them or polish them, but it was all on an individual basis, and so not all the rods were shaved down equally. In fact, cylinder number 8 right over there looks like it still has most of it as well. If we compare the rod to a 100% stock one, you can still tell that material was removed, but not to the extent that the other rods were. I might have to pull all the rods off the pistons and weigh them one by one to see what exactly is going on here. I went ahead and ran my indicator through the rods and then compared it to the crank, and I did find out that the crank was actually undersized about 10 thousandths or so. Now that the pistons are out, the crank does actually spin really good. I don't feel any kind of binding. It feels really solid. An interesting thing about the crank though is that I actually found this. It looks like they put a little bit of weld here in order to gain some of that weight back. Like I said in my last video, there's plenty of evidence showing that this engine was running and driving before it was parked. And from what I can tell on the rod bearings, I don't think that it was parked because of an oil starvation issue. And I haven't found any serious problems with the engine yet, aside from the pitting in cylinder number 7. It looks like I did speak a little too soon. Check this out. This was the same piston that I pulled out of cylinder number 4. There's a hairline crack that starts right up here, and it terminates right around right there or so, and it looks like it's going all the way down. And in fact, if we flip it over, you can kind of tell that another crack is starting to form right here down the middle. You can kind of see by the wear marks that the piston's been shifting around in the bore a little bit. It does look to me like it's suffering from a little bit of piston slap. I haven't cleaned these pistons at all. I just pulled them out and I wiped them down just so I can look at them. Ironically enough, this was the easiest piston to pull out, and it was also the cleanest. Turns out it also had a crack in it. If we go ahead and flip it around, for the most part, it looks like it's in pretty good shape. Still has that, grainy surface look to it, but I can't feel anything with my finger. So it might just be a little bit of vibration. If we look at the inside of the piston, you can definitely see that the crack goes all the way through the piston and ends. Actually, it ends right there where the piston starts getting a little bit thicker toward the end of the skirt. But I bet a little bit of high RPM would have decimated this piston. So lucky they stopped driving on it. Let's see if I can find another crack on these pistons. I just went through the other 7 pistons and I didn't actually find any kind of cracks. So that's lucky that only one of them suffered that kind of damage. Jumping back on top, I went ahead and I pulled off the center main cap just to see what the bearing looks like. And in fact, the main journal doesn't look bad at all. It actually looks really good. Since they went ahead and they undersized the rod journals, I have no doubt that they undersized the main journals as well. But it looks good to me. If we look at the bearing itself, the bearing looks like it's in decent shape. There's a little bit of wear down there in the middle, but overall not bad at all. There's quite a bit of wear on the thrust side of this, but I don't think it's anything for me to worry about. Like I said, this looks like this engine was ran for a decent amount of time before I ever got it. If it ran exactly like this with so many miles, I'm pretty sure it's fine. If there was any kind of detrimental issues, you would have found out right away. I'm sure if I pull the other 4 main caps, I'm not going to find any issues as well. So for the most part, the crank checks out, main bearings check out, and for the most part, the rod bearings do check out even though the crank was undersized. But now that I have all the pistons out, what do the bores look like? Alright, so this is the passenger side. I just gave everything a quick scuff just to like clear off all the debris, and that way we have a more general idea of what we're looking at. We can see here in cylinder number 4, that was a piston that had the crack in it. You can see that it loses a little bit of stability here. It's still shiny in some areas where the hone didn't touch it at all. Right here in the middle, it seems like it was running fine. And then toward the bottom, you can see that there's another 2 marks right there, which is unusual. We can see these 2 white lines and these 2 darker lines. So this top line, this ribbon, is from basically zero wear. The piston was not touching here. The rings were not touching here. This is basically the evidence of a perfect 30 over bore. And then you can see that there's a dark line right after it, which tells us that it's more worn here than it is here. So this is probably sitting a couple thousandths larger than the original 30 over. The second white line is from just the piston running up across it. And if I run my finger on it, you can feel a slight hump. So there's less wear here, and then there's more wear again on this dark line. This is going to be from the top piston ring. And even though it's the most obvious in this cylinder, every one of these cylinders has some sort of markings that kind of show what's going on. And it's all pretty much showing you the exact same thing. The good news is that if we take these 4 cylinders and we put a 10 thousandths overbore on here, this will clean up. Like I mentioned in my last video, we still have 30 overbore left, so if I use 10 of it to clean up these 4 cylinders, I'm in pretty good shape. But that's not where the story ends. Jumping over to the opposite side, I'm skipping over cylinder 1, 3, and 5 because it's more or less about the same as the other 4 on the other side. The only one we're really concerned about is cylinder number 7. So I gave it, a quick hone, just like we did the other side. And just look at the cylinder wall. We've knocked out most of the dirt that was in here, and the remaining part is all steel, or at least most of the steel that I was able to hit. You can tell that the water was sitting right here, starting from there all the way to there, and then we've got pitting from moisture all the way around the cylinder. So let's say we cut these cylinders at a 10 overbore, this cylinder would still not clean up. Just for fun, I took a measurement from this black spot to the opposite side just to see, ballpark, to see where we're at. And in that spot right there, because I know it's lower, it actually sits somewhere between 15 and 20 thousandths above the 30 overboard. So in this black area right here, this cylinder is already 15 over, let's say 20 over. So from this area right here, I only have 10 left, and I don't know if this is going to clean up. And considering how much pitting there is all around here, I don't know if it's actually going to clean up if we cut it to the next oversize above here, which actually happens to be the maximum oversize of 4310 or 60 over. So in layman's terms, we need pistons. That's like a given. We have to overbore these at least 10 over to clean them up. If we get pistons, I'm going to want pistons that sit up a little bit higher on the deck. And because there's a step here, that's going to cause problems, maybe even damage some rings. So an overbore is definitely due. The standard piston above here is not 10 over. The next standard piston is 60 over, which is the 4310. We talked about using a 4310 in cylinder number 7, and it still might not clean up, and that's the unfortunate part. I could go ahead and order a single piston, and that'll take care of the piston that's cracked, put the same pistons back in, put a new set of rings on there. The only problem is that cylinder number 7, because of the way it's shaped, it's not going to seal properly, and I'm going to have a completely dead hole, so that's going to be a problem as well. I've still got to pull the rods off these pistons and figure out how much each one of these weighs, and then I'm going to have to take the whole assembly and go get it rebalanced if I do get another set of pistons. If I do get this to the maximum overbore and it's still not enough to clean this up, my only option after that is to actually get this cylinder sleeved, which is just another expense that I really don't want to go through. Basically, they will cut this beyond the maximum overbore, then they'll drop a sleeve, and then they'll machine the sleeve to match the rest of the cylinders. It is a common practice, but it's a few $100s just to get that done. If we add in a couple $100s for the sleeve, a couple $100s for the pistons, a couple $100s for the balancing, then a couple more dollars to get the whole block bored out, we're looking at a pretty hefty price here. And I'm not sure if this block is worth investing. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to let you guys decide. Depending on what the comments say, if you guys think I should go for it, I will go ahead and rebuild this engine. If in your honest opinion, you would go ahead and spend over $1,000 in redoing this 383, maybe with some nicer parts, maybe not. But if you can give me a good reason, a good case for redoing this 383, I might consider rebuilding this. But it's up in the air right now. I want to hear what you guys think. I will see you guys all in the next one. Night Wrencher, signing out.